Alrighty, well, I will start this show off. We are going to cover the markets first, then we'll talk about the stocks. I got Mike's list as well of some of the stocks he was watching, talk about the economics and stuff that we're expecting this week, and then we will take questions, talk questions, and anything else we want to talk about at the end here. But first of all, as always, I should talk about the market because yeah, we had a nice little end to the day there on Friday. We really kind of took out some levels, really started slicing through. And when we were talking on the show on Friday, we were just trying to battle around VWAP here. And as we were leaving, we kind of started crossing below. And I said, look out and be careful if we start slicing through levels. And lo and behold, there we go. People went risk off into the weekend. We're not really getting any headlines over the weekend. I haven't really seen anything too crazy, so it's possible that we gap up back up on Monday, or we continue to see that sell-off. We are going into quad witching this week, so Friday will be quad witching, so you'll have a whole bunch of options expiring. We'll probably see some we'll see some craziness if there's a lot of gamma to unclench. So we'll see what happens there going into Friday. But until then, I mean, we broke some resistance in here. We broke the 20-day. So if we open up down here, it's definitely a wait and see on the market, in my opinion, just because we got to make sure that selling's done. And this selling wasn't really, in my opinion, perpetrated by anything in particular. It wasn't perpetrated by any headlines. Obviously, you have taper talks and things like that back here on Thursday. You had a Fed governor who was talking a bunch and kept talking about the tapering and so on. I believe I saw a headline that Goldman thinks that tapering is being started probably in November. No real surprise there, honestly. I think they're going to want to wait to see that October jobs number anyway. But yeah, we finished week, and we were still making these lower highs and lower lows, still taking out lows, and so we finished at lows. And right now, momentum is still on the downside. And we talked about how the small caps, had a nice rally in here, but then they kind of started sputtering, and we saw people flocking back into the quote-unquote safety trades of the market, the Apples, the Amazons, the Netflixes, the Microsofts, and we saw those stocks starting to outperform again, which was concerning because we saw the internals of the market really start to roll over. The percentage of stocks trading above the 50-day SMA had a nice recovery with the market, and then that kind of started dropping first as we saw a lot of stocks pulling back and people taking profits while the rest of the market was trying to battle. So eventually, something had to give. And part of this, in my opinion, is because you had such outsized weakness in Apple on Friday because they had that court ruling. I still need to look into it, but it looks like it could be, if the headlines are what people are saying they are, I need to get an actual lawyer's opinion, not people on internet forums. Then if this allows their app stores to circumvent the 30% cut that Apple gets from everything, then that could be interesting. It would definitely be a big hit to their revenues. But I'd have to, we'd have to, that's take some digging in there. But you had a really nice drop in here by Apple. Obviously, Apple's one of the highest weighted stocks in most of the indexes, so that would obviously weigh down on the market as well. So we saw a lot of selling, a lot of just risk off. IWM small caps pulled back to a pretty important level here, right on the 20-day and 50-day SMA stacked up here. A little bit of an inflection point here. It's nothing too serious, but these moving averages here are hopefully we're going to be where we hold, because you also have a little bit of a pullback zone here at this 220. And all three of these moving averages are getting pretty stacked here on the IWM and small caps, which is interesting because obviously they haven't done anything pretty much all calendar year. Qs, meanwhile, they were weak, but they're still outperforming the rest of the market. We haven't even approached the 20-day SMA yet, so that just kind of puts into perspective perhaps how, yes, we had a weak Friday, but we still have more that you could drop theoretically on this market because the Qs haven't even dropped. It's kind of like in here where back in July we had the Qs drop down to the 20, but then meanwhile the SPY had pulled all the way back down to the 50, and the IWM was testing its 200. So we're kind of back in that mode where the market's pulling back, but you have different layers within there of, okay, tech is still kind of strong. For example, they dip bought Netflix yesterday, and they finished green on Friday in Netflix. So people are still greedy out there clearly. They're still trying to hold on to profits in those kinds of stocks. But they're just taking profits on everything else that they don't deem is the safety trade right now. So we'll see how that goes. Rates, meanwhile, just been chopping around here. We saw some interesting movements through the week, just as results of big bond auctions. So you had very big, I believe this was the 30-year bond auction in here, I believe, and we saw a nice little pop on that. And then back in here, you had more bond auctions. So you see some movements on those, but it's nothing that changes the structure of the rates. It just causes temporary pops. But we are still holding up here. We're ascending. We're holding as best we can. It's going to be interesting to watch that one. TYX, meanwhile, holding, consolidating as well. So that's no real pressure on the markets there. And then looking at some of the commodities out there, oil's just been complete sideways action. You get some headlines here and there talking about the Iran deal, things like that. That's kind of been hitting the headlines again. Market's not really reacting to it too much because we don't really have any change in the expectations there. But that's going to be stuff that you need to monitor on oil, obviously, because that can affect the markets. Gold, meanwhile, just hanging out after this sizable pullback, and the dollar obviously kind of weak as well. So both are really hanging out under some resistance here. So it's going to be interesting to see who gives, if maybe people push into the dollar as a safety for the market pulling back or not. Because you also had Ethereum and crypto running not too long ago, and then they just had some nice sizable pullbacks, a little bit of a flash crash. They bought that, and then Friday it spilled over as well. We pretty much saw selling in almost everything on Friday, so people went really risk off going into the weekend. So at this point, Ethereum's back below the breakout point. Bitcoin's back below the breakout point. We'll have to see where that stops and bottoms. It's definitely not worth trying to catch a falling knife on those, but that's what we're seeing on the markets there. So going into the week, the news that we can watch for, you have Treasury statements on Monday, 2 p.m. Also on Friday, we had a complete blowout evisceration PPI numbers. So that inflationary kind of print is still there. Tuesday, we have CPI now, so that's going to be another inflationary print. That's really the only news there on Tuesday. So it'll be interesting to see if that continues to show that inflationary thing. The jobs numbers that we had 2 weeks ago were very weak, showed a lot of stagflation issues, so that's going to be something to keep an eye on as well. Wednesday, you've got a slew of other numbers: Empire State Manufacturing, import-export prices, industrial production, yada, yada, yada. Thursday as well, you've got some numbers, and then Friday's just quad witching with consumer sentiment. So I don't expect anything too crazy out of all those numbers. I think it's more just going to be, if we get any headlines, it'll probably be Fed related, maybe a Fed governor talking something along those lines. But you never know these days in any of these markets. So that's what we'll be watching. Maybe you see Apple bounce if they talk about appealing the court ruling. Who knows? That's something you could expect as well. They said that they haven't decided if they want to appeal or not. So going to be something that we need to keep an eye on. So that's where we are in the markets. Levels to watch. I mean, obviously the 50-day SMA would be kind of your next value zone here. It's where we keep bouncing from, but obviously I'd caution you that someday that trade won't work, and then we'll probably be on our way to the 200 at that point. But gonna watch it if we do continue to see that weakness next week into that level. That's typically where we've been pulling back during these options expiration events. We'll see what happens there. IWM, obviously, if it slices through, you've got the 200, but it could pierce through maybe and test this support in here as well. And the Qs haven't even touched their 20-day yet, and then after that, you've got the 50-day close behind. So you've got some layered support below us. We'll just have to see how we react if we get down there. So that's the market. Just going through a couple of the stocks that me and Mike are watching. I'll go through some of Mike's first. I know he's watching Datadog. It's been kind of ascending here pretty nicely ever since they reported earnings not too long ago, in a nice little upward channel. Obviously seeing weakness with a lot of the rest of the market, but it is still above its 20-day. So I think he's watching it in respects to this channel. If the market does rebound, this is a stock that's been pretty strong. And if it does break this channel, you'd probably get a nice little pullback in this one. I'm not sure his directional bias. Roblox as well. There's a couple stocks that popped on Friday with that Apple headline, because if their apps are on the App Store, and if that does allow them to circumvent the 30% Apple cut, well, there you go. Obviously beneficial for them. Roblox is one of those ones that we saw pop. This is one he's traded before in the past. It topped out here at this previous resistance, but he's definitely keeping an eye on this one going into this week to see if volume can stick around. Unity Software is another one that popped with that as well, but it quickly sold off those profits. Match did, Bumble did, a lot of apps that are on the App Store popped with that news. DoorDash as well has been in a nice little ascent. Volume's been okay. It's not been tremendous, but it's been good enough. Now we are coming up to some resistance back over here from not long after the IPO, so it's going to be something to watch. And if you were looking for the long swing, I think you're a little late to this party, but I think he's still looking for at it for short-term pullbacks or short-term plays. I kind of alluded to Airbnb as well. This one a little earlier on the breakout, kind of wedged up here and is testing its breakout now. Again, kind of like the other one, the issue in this one is volume or lack thereof. There's just really no volume, which almost makes it look a little worrisome. But we'll have to see if that one can hold up. As well. I did see, I believe the lockup period on Airbnb expired, so a lot of potential liquidity ahead of it, but we'll have to see how that continues. Tractor Supply, nice little breakout here. One of the stronger stocks in the market, ignored the market action. Just broke through the psychological 200 level, which was also 52-week highs, and sitting up here pretty nicely. So this could be a good little breakout and continuation play, especially since it seems to be ignoring the general market. So could be a good one to watch. In Figs, I'm not sure what his level that he's watching for on here, but we did just bounce off the moving averages, so I think he might be looking for a rebound back up into 46. So I know that this is one on his list as well. Home Depot, he's watching Home Depot. I convinced myself not to because I watched it all through here, and it just couldn't get active. It couldn't get going like it did in the past. Maybe third time's the charm here. So he's watching it because we've based off the 50-day pretty nicely, and now we're kind of ascending a little bit. We'll have to see how it reacts this week because it just never really got the oomph this week to go. Etsy sitting below a pretty decent little level here, flagging a little bit. I know he's watching and waiting for this little flag to break. Whether he gets it this week or not, we'll have to just obviously wait and see. But he's going to watch and wait to see if we can get up that 225, 226 level and start going. And then finally, one of his plays is INMD. He's been watching this one because it's kind of been breaking and trying to break. Again, an issue here is you have lesser volumes on some of these red days, which is good, but he needs that volume to pop back in and get over that 140 because at this point we failed 140 twice. So he's got to be careful on that one. That's probably what he's going to be watching there. Some of the stocks that I'm watching. So first of all, I'll talk about some of the shorts and I'll talk longs. Long setups because I wanted both, and I wanted some that could be good on a day trading perspective. Twitter. This Twitter's kind of rolling over with the market, but it's approaching its 200-day SMA here. So last time they did dip by it around here, so we'll have to see if they defend it here. But it's been weaker than the market. It's been below its moving averages for some time. We just broke through this little weekly low here. We're at this pullback point. So if it does slice through some of these levels, Twitter could be fading off here, especially compared to the strength you're seeing in the rest of the sector. Going to watch that one. AMD as well. Been waiting for this one to break. I think the market weakness kind of helped it. So I'm a little worried that this one's just going to kind of play with the market. So that's a hesitation I have, but I do like that we're kind of breaking through here. And you have some room below it to that psychological level, which also almost coincides with the 50-day SMA. So I'll be watching AMD on the short side this week. Roku has been very weak, kind of failed its 200-day SMA very aggressively here over the last month or so, which was originally a buy point. Now it's become kind of a liquidity zone. So now we're actually selling off here, getting below some of these lows. So I think Roku almost looks pretty good on the weak side. People aren't buying this one anymore like they used to in here, so looking pretty significant. Some significant selling in here, so I'll be watching Roku as well. Target, I like Target because we've kind of failed off of here and we've been unable to get back above the 50-day, trending lower. I think Target has a lot of room to give back. It had a very nice ascent in here. But it's not the fastest mover, so it's not that exciting. Same with Chewy. It's not the fastest mover. Volume's kind of drying off, but it's getting below this pretty significant support here, where we've seen dip buying happen several times, and we're looking like we're going to fail off from here pretty aggressively. And if we do, I'd then look around maybe this support zone in here. You got a little bit of a high volume node in here as well. So this is kind of my range to see if we get down in here and then see if the buyers step in. I like Chewy as a company. I just don't like it technically. It's looking like a bit of a short here. DocuSign, meanwhile, looks like a bit of a bait long and then drop them. So DocuSign had really good earnings in here. Couldn't hold the 52-week highs, and then they dropped this thing out aggressively before the market did. So, watching these lows in here, It's obviously come a long way in a week. It's really dropped off here, so it's kind of I'm a little hesitant to want to short this one right away. I might let this one develop and see if it gives me a really clean entry with some good manageable risk. But it's looking like it was a bait long, and they're dropping it, and you got some room below it here. I'll keep an eye on that one as well. And then finally, another short is PayPal. Uh, I'm not so keen on this price action here. It's really trying to hold it. Almost looks like it's setting up a head and shoulders with this pattern. We filled this gap technically, and then we cracked off here. It's not been able to really sustain itself since this headline in here that drove it up, where they said that they're announcing that they're opening their own trading platform or something. So now I'm just watching the support of these kind of last 2 weeks, and if we drop that off, I think we get back into this high volume node. Biggest issue with the PayPal short is you've got a lot of layered levels here below it. So how much alpha can I really think I have? It's really if I have a good strong belief that maybe we're coming back down into here or something. So we'll have to see, but this feels like it's going to crack off. A couple of the longs that I'm watching, AMC, I'm going to say it, wedged up here, broke out on Friday and held. And if we think the market's going to be weaker and see some weakness, well, the meme stocks might come back into a little bit more rotation in favor. Volume's been pretty light, which is the biggest issue for it. But it has been breaking out right now, and if it holds up here and continues this breakout, you got some room above it before resistance. So I do like this AMC, but we need to see what the market does. Disney as well, obviously weekday with the market on Friday. I'm a little hesitant because we just failed off of these earnings highs, but if it holds up here, it's been coiled for a while. You've got some seriously stacked moving averages. I just need to make sure that if the market dries off, it won't dry off with it. I might need to be a little patient with this one because it's a slow one right now. Lows as well. I need to see this one get back up here towards this resistance, setting some alerts up here because I'm not going to just sit here and watch paint dry trying to wait for this thing to get up here. But if it does, I think you have some good squeeze potential up here and a nice little, probably a bunch of shorts with stops layered around that 210. So if it does start to approach that again, I think there's potential as well. Kind of goes hand in hand with Mike's Home Depot play, I suppose. McDonald's, if I extend this a little bit, kind of breaking out to an extent, stronger than the market. Kind of holding up here a little bit. You've seen some interesting food inflation plays. I want to see, especially if the market rebounds, it's been holding its 50-day pretty decently here over the last couple of months. So I want to see if we can get back up towards these highs around this 241 or so, and then maybe we can start pushing for new 52-week highs. But it's looking okay. I just need to make sure it holds. Nvidia's obviously been very strong, has been holding up here nicely. I'm a little hesitant to want to say I want to long this, but it's holding very bullishly right now, putting in a nice little flag. I'll wait and make sure I get confirmation, but you've got a nice clean 220 or so to trade off of. Moving averages are actually relatively close. So it's been this is good action after a nice little drive off of earnings. So if it looks like it's going to break, then I think you might have a good play in Nvidia, not selling off with the rest of the market either. Lithium's been an interesting play. Really had some, a little bit of a drop here, and then they bought that. Problem is the market weakness kind of drove it down a little bit, but I'm not done with this play. I think that this one breaks out more this week. I think this is still pretty early in the move for Lithium potentially. I want to see if I can get back up towards the high 20s personally. Or you could watch SQM. SQM's a little bit more of a recent break. You have descending highs from the beginning of the year that we just broke finally on Friday. So I think this SQM actually looks pretty good. It's got very stacked moving averages down here, so you've got some interesting manageable risk. Mike's LTHM is trying to break, but it's not quite as strong as the others. But if it does get up here, you've got a lot of wicks, which tells you that the sellers are strong in here. If those sellers eventually give up, you've got a lot of shorts that'll probably ignite this thing higher. So to be fair, this one does have potential if it gets going. Facebook, we talked about Twitter being very weak. Well, Facebook's not weak whatsoever, holding up here very nicely, especially compared to the rest of the general market. That's a good sign, especially that it has its own independent order flow. Especially if the market starts rebounding, people might push into something like this because it was holding relatively nicely. I'm still watching EA. Again, this one is not one that I'm just going to watch every single day. It's more of I'm setting alerts for this high breakout. I want to see us get up there. Moving averages have been stacked, and it's been holding as best it can. So keeping a close eye on that one. CN, actually this is a short that got put in the wrong list. Nice drop down to this 200-day SMA. They had earnings recently, failed hard off of this resistance, And now either we're going to dip buy off of this level here and dip buy off of that 200, and you'll see a nice little rebound, or honestly, because this is where we've dip bought several times, or we'll finally fail from here. And if we do, you've got a lot of room potentially for this thing to drop towards 50, 48 or so, somewhere in this zone. So going to keep an eye on this one. I think it'll take a day or two to really hopefully convince me, but I'll watch that one. AFRM, nice explosion on Friday due to earnings. Finished at the highs. If this one relatively opens around here, then I'm going to look for second day continuation on an earnings ignition play. Got a little bit of a range to work off of for the second half of Friday. But I like the levels that I'm seeing on this one. And I like this chart. This almost feels like it baited the shorts in, and then people who didn't know earnings were coming got squeezed out. It's above the psychological $100 level. They had an Amazon partnership in here talked about, and now it's kind of popping on earnings. So this one could continue. I'm definitely going to watch that ignition play to continue. Some other stocks in play. ISEE. There we go. Stock that moved and grooved on Friday. I believe it was biotech news. I like this one because if I zoom in here to the day action on Friday, we put in a pretty nice range. So you have this range and you have this resistance, and then we finished relatively strongly. And I need to see where this one opens on Monday. But we were actually gapping up slightly going into the end of Friday's after-hour session. So if we gap up towards this 15 on Monday, this could be a good day trader. We'll have to see where obviously it opens by Monday. It could be a good short if we return down to the lows of these levels. So you got a nice range to work off of going into Monday for a potential second day play. APLS as well. Gap down pretty aggressively yesterday on bad biotech data, and look at this tail wick down here. I mean, they pretty much drove this thing down to these 52-week lows and then dip bought the heck out of it, almost finished it higher for the day. So at this point, we might get a squeeze through some of this resistance. This resistance here, actually, if I zoom out, kind of coincides with pre-market lows really nicely from Friday. So those levels sometimes work out pretty nicely. So if we do get back above this level, which also coincides with the high of Friday, I think you could get that bounce play pretty nicely. I don't know if that happens on Monday. Maybe it bounces, it chops around on here for a couple days and then goes. A couple more stocks. Peloton ignited the last 2 days of the week because they're starting their own private apparel brand. I don't know if that's going to be enough of a headline to ignite this thing through the 200 and continue, but you've had a really nice ascending volume over the last 2 days. So this is just one that I'm going to watch on Monday to see if the volume sticks around. It's Peloton, so I'm not holding my breath on that one, but it could, and it could have one or two more good day trading days in it. If it doesn't, this could be a good failure from the 200 as shorts pile back in, so I'll have to watch that one. Snapchat is really trying to fight around in here. It's ascending and kind of tightening. I don't think we get anything from it this week, but it's something to set. I'm setting alerts on kind of as a collar just to see which direction it goes. IRNT is a day trader, but I'm not too keen on that one, so I'm not even going to mention that one. Match. So Match was announced in here. It was added to the S&P 500. Pretty big headline for it. And then in here it gapped along with the Apple headlines because they have an app, I assume, on the App Store. Now the issue here is we couldn't hold this resistance into the close, which does worry me. But if it can get back up here into this resistance into the week, I think we could have a nice little second move on that one as well. My last three, Kroger. Kroger had a heck of a pullback here on its earnings. I believe I'd have to double check as my memory's failing me. I'm pretty sure it had really, really good earnings. It raised full year guidance, it beat on earnings, and it had a lot of good stuff in there. I think they had maybe some supply chain concerns. In here we had Warren Buffett investment headlines as well. So that's a pretty hefty pullback for Kroger, especially with such a strong sector like Costco, BJ's, and stocks like that that have really been running. So I'm going to watch in here for a potential value buy. It may have already have happened. We'll see where we are. I'm not going to be the first to buy. I'm not going to try to be a hero on this one. That was a pretty significant haircut on Kroger for earnings. So going to keep a close eye on it there. Netflix. I keep saying I want the short in Netflix, but I'm a little worried because they're not dropping this thing out. But I'm going to watch these weekly lows. If we fail from $600, nice psychological level, we are kind of descending in terms of daily highs. So, we'll see, and we're starting to make lower lows. But, Monday, I think, is going to be an important day for it to determine because it's had a heck of a run in here over the last month or so. and I'd like to see it cool down, but we'll see what we get in there. Other than that, the cruise line's kind of chopping around. RCL got fighting around this 200-day, so I'm going to wait, let some of those reopening plays develop. Airlines just couldn't get it going, so I'm kind of glad that my biases led me to avoid them last 2 weeks, because they just haven't been kind to me, and so I used that kind of that recent painful experience to avoid them, which is good because they're returning back to these lows at the moment. We'll see what happens to them. But people could scoop them up as a dip buy in here. But you're already seeing some of those value reopening plays that bounced. A lot of them are already coming back down. So like MSGS coming back down, LVS coming back down. A lot of those depressed stocks that you saw people value buy, they're already getting out. So they're already getting out of these and going back into the safety trades. And so that's why you're seeing the percentage of stocks trading above the 50-day SMA plummeting like this. So the question this week is just going to be whether people continue that trade, whether they try to scoop some of these stocks back up, or what happens. But that's why I've got so many stocks on my watch list, because I'm going to be setting a lot of alerts, because I need to see where the rotation's going, and I need to see what people are actually going to be buying, because who knows what this market's thinking, especially with Friday's action. But that's it from me. Really going to be an interesting week. It's going to be hopefully light on headlines, unless the Fed governors don't stop talking and don't stop talking to conferences and so on. A weak week last week, obviously, but we're going to have to see if the dip buyers step in here as they usually do. So that's it for me. So yeah.